So sometimes in extraction shooters, there are some guns that are ridiculously strong that are just slightly worse than some of the best meta weapons. So they become extremely underrated and you end up not seeing them a lot, even though they could be incredibly strong and may even be a lot cheaper than some of the meta weapons while still having really good stats. So in this video, I want to go over the best build for what I think is one of those weapons, and that's the CZ807. And make sure to subscribe for tons of videos on Arena Breakout Infinite and other upcoming extraction shooters. Now, I have previously gone over this weapon because this weapon as a budget build is kind of absurd. It's not actually a ton better doing a fully built version of this weapon, just because some of the parts, and more specifically, some of the most expensive parts of other weapons, and more specifically meta weapons, you just can't do much on. Like specifically something like the stock. A lot of the other best weapons in the game, you have to put like 4 different parts onto the stock, and it ends up being like close to 200,000 for that combination of stock pieces. And this is just like 15 to 20,000 for the best stock for this weapon. So the kind of base stats of this gun are really good. So that means even a fully built version of this weapon is still really good stats, but also pretty cheap, especially when compared to the most meta weapons. It's a 7.62 weapon with 82 vertical recoil and 77 horizontal recoil. Now, I will say I did see a lot more of these at the start of season 3, but recently I haven't been seeing a ton of these, even though I think these things are really, really good. And with those stats, as a 7.62 is 750 RPM, it can kind of do it all. You can use it at much longer ranges. Like, I would definitely recommend using a scope on this actually. It has a pretty good RPM, so just straight up head-to-head battles, you're not at a big disadvantage. It has a really good recoil for fully automatic spraying. It's just generally a very good weapon that's just a little bit below like the top tier meta weapons, which is essentially an HK. But going into the build itself, for the stock, you're using the ZC807 tactical stock. We're going up, we're going to be using the SIG standard rear and front sights. These just give +1 ergo each, and ergo is something that this weapon is a little bit low on if you're using like a longer range sight in a 50 rounder. And these are both under like 1000 Cohen for just some additional ergo. Then you're going to be able to put whatever sight you want on this. Generally on weapons that I can use at longer ranges, I've been using the 30mm rail sight mount with the 1x 6x scope. This is a really expensive scope. You'll see this as a pretty common scope. If you want to use another one, you can use a 3.5x prison scope. That's a 1x 3.5x. And the prices of those are kind of hard to gauge. I think the 1x 6x is generally going to be more expensive. Sights are just crazy expensive this season, so the price labeled on this when you're building the weapon is pretty much never even close to being right. So just keep that in mind. If you want to use a cheaper sight, you can. You could use like a hollow sight or something like this and massively reduce the price. Then we have the ZC807 charging handle. Then we have the ZC807 long receiver. And then on that, we're going to be using the lightweight tactical vertical front grip. Now, this is still the best grip in the game, even though it's ridiculously expensive. So if you want to save quite a lot, you can go down for the B25 tilt front grip, just -2 vertical recoil, but it's usually like less than half the price of the lightweight tactical grip. And another actually pretty good option this season is the RK6. It reduces your ergo, your horizontal and vertical recoil by a little bit, but it also gives you +6 weapon stability, which can be pretty nice. Now, personally, with this weapon specifically, if you're using a longer range scope that drops your ergo more, I would recommend still using like the B25 or the lightweight, just because your ergo may get a bit too low with that when your ergo is already a bit lower. But then you're going to be using the ZC807 conventional barrel, and then on that, you're using the 7.62x3.9 suppressor. That's also another really good thing about this weapon, is that the best suppressor is only like 15 to 20k, somewhere in that range. Some of the other more meta weapons, the suppressors will be very expensive. So this full build, keep in mind with the very expensive sight and front grip, it's 435k. But if you want to change that up, and let's say you want to use the Bat Ears holographic sight, which in my opinion is the best non-scoped sight, and then you want to switch up to like the B25 tilt front grip, you can switch that up, and now you're at 250k. It is just incredibly cheap with some small options that only slightly reduce your stats. But then we have our ammo. You're never going to want to be using the white ammo. And I would also say with a weapon like this, you probably don't want to be using purple ammo either. You have HP, which is leg ammo. I never use leg ammo, so I don't recommend it. You have PS ammo, which is actually incredibly cheap for tier 3 penning ammo. It's 55 base damage, decent initial muzzle velocity, 33 pen, 14 armor damage, a decent round, actually really good for how cheap this thing is. It's almost always under 400 round. Then you have T45M, which is another tier 3 penning. It's just a bit better of a tier 3 pending in general, but for the price of T45M, I would generally not recommend it. For this weapon build, I would always just recommend BP at minimum. It's usually around 2,000 a round, 55 base damage, decent initial muzzle velocity, 45 pen, 23 armor damage, gives some additional accuracy as well. Just a really good all-around round. I think one of the better tier 4 penning rounds, just because of being a higher caliber, it generally hits harder. Then if you want to spend a lot more, you can get AP. It's usually like 7,000. On average, 7,000 can usually get a bit lower than that, but it's a tier 5 penning, 45 base damage, same initial muzzle velocity, 54 pen, 32 armor damage. AP ammo is pretty crazy hover around. If you're facing tier 5, you're probably going to shred them. Tier 6 is the only option you really have if you're going against them. But BP ammo, you can still face people tier 5 and below. Tier 5 is going to require a few more shots, but you'll generally still be fine. If you're up against tier 6 though, with BP, you're not really going to be doing much. You're going to have to break their armor. It really all depends what you want to use. This is the best version of this build. It's a really good weapon. So if you want to use AP, this is a weapon that's worthwhile using AP with. But that's the entirety of this weapon build. And I think this is legitimately one of the most underrated weapons now, especially with the meta. I know pretty much everybody, once you get to a certain point, are just using HKs or AKs, but I think this is a really, really good weapon, especially if you want to make it a bit cheaper. Like I mentioned, go with like a holographic sight or a cheaper scope and switch out your front grip. You could even go a bit cheaper and go with the triangular front grip if you want to lose a little bit of stats but go cheaper. You could go the B25 toe front grip, change out your sight, and now you're sitting with a much cheaper, like 255k depending on when you're playing. And the weapon is crazy stats for that amount. You can throw in some BP, and especially if you're playing like Lockdown or something, this thing's going to be absolutely incredible for that. But you could still use it in Forbidden Zone as well, and still going to be a really good weapon. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.
I'm gonna flank. Oh my god, I'm stuck. Come down the hill, come down.